Forgotten, The Frozen North, Chapter 7, Dreamwalker, Part 1. A long time ago, Princess Flurryheart stared almost dumbfounded at the elderly Princess of the Night in Dreams standing in the doorway of the old EUP cabin, who gave her a soft smile.
It has been quite a long time since I've been called that child,
Luna said, and Flurry smiled back.
I'm sure it's been an equally long time since anyone has called me a child,
She replied. Luna stepped aside, inviting the younger Alicorn inside.
Come in, out of the cold, your highness. I'm sure that there has been quite a bit that we could learn from each other.
Flurry stepped into the cabin, and Luna closed the door behind her. It was largely as she remembered it from the last time this cabin was staffed by a crystal guard. Luna had done very little in renovations, except for keeping up maintenance, ensuring it stayed livable and the interior was suitably shielded from the outside elements.
I'm afraid I can only offer you tea, milk, or water. I only asked for the most basic necessities from your guard. I apologize for the subterfuge, but I didn't want word to spread that I was up here before the time was right,
Luna told her, as she sat down next to the crackling fireplace.
I'm fine, thank you, but I don't understand. You've been up here all this time?
Flurry asked, stepping up to the fireplace in its inviting warmth.
Well, that entirely depends on what you mean by all this time.
Luna began, sipping at her tea.
For the past 40 years or so, and I will explain why. But first, let's talk about why you have come all the way up here. I can only assume that it has to do with that worsening weather that is not moving from above the Empire?
Flurry nodded, sitting down across from Luna.
I've been having recurring nightmares for weeks now, to the point where I'm convinced that it's a premonition. I've gotten so worried that Spike told me that you were up here when I told him I needed a dreamwalker to help me consider what it is, and what I can possibly do about it.
Flurry explained. Luna nodded in understanding.
Yes, Spike was one of the very few that I told when I came up here. He made arrangements for monthly supply runs up here, only the bare necessities, so as to not place any unneeded strain on your city's populace. Everybody I talked to believed that you vanished after Celestia.
Princess Luna nodded, and Flurry didn't need to complete her sentence.
Seeing my sister pass was one of the hardest days of my life, and it led to the loneliest days. I quickly grew incredibly restless and decided to leave Silver Shoals. I spent the next few decades traveling to every corner of Equestria and beyond. The Dragonlands, Griffinstone, Myrtania, Antlaria, Abyssnia, Pharisai. I went everywhere, pondering what was in store for me, after how long I had left.
Flurry didn't say anything, choosing to listen intently, assuming that Luna had more to say.
I never truly accepted that my responsibility to Equestria ended along with my sister's when Princess Twilight took over. Not when I spent a millennium rightfully imprisoned for my crimes. I always felt that resuming my duties of tending to the moon and dreamwalking were not enough for repentance. So towards the end of my travels, I also began to have premonitions. And that is what drove me up here. You too?
Flurry asked, and Luna nodded.
And I'm hoping that we can help each other out with them. So, tell me, how have things been down in the valley? Down in the city?
Luna asked. Flurry ruffled her wings momentarily.
For the most part, unbearably dull. Mama's right, I've spent years upon years wishing for something exciting. And now, with everything that's been happening, I want to go back to dull. Be careful what you wish for and all, I guess. Can I assume you've heard what happened to Cloudsdale?
Flurry asked. Luna nodded solemnly.
Ponies had to let small differences in arguments get to them, and have let them become greater divisions. They have slowly forgotten everything that Princess Twilight and her friends have taught them. Even the other kingdoms across Equus are beginning to distance themselves from us, and each other once again. My greatest fear is that Chrysalis, Tyrek, and Cozy Glow did ultimately succeed in the long term.
Luna reflected.
Canterlot has become unbearably overpopulated when Cloudsdale collapsed on it 6 months ago. The last report I received is that conflict is inevitable. How can we possibly stop something like that?
Flurry asked.
Well, we should look to what has brought us together, Princess. Our premonitions. How spent are you from a climb? It has been some time since I've performed spells like this, but the more in need of rest you are, the easier this will be.
Luna told her. Flurry looked at the oak and bronze clock on the wall above the fireplace. It was late afternoon, and the alteration spells keeping the cold at bay or not, she felt that she could nod off if she got comfortable enough.
I think I could take a nap, yes,
she told the Princess of the Night. Luna motioned to the couch against the front wall as she got to her hooves. The Crystal Princess made her way over to it, stretching out on it, getting as comfortable as she could. Luna had made her way over to a modest twin bed in the back corner. She slowly laid down, bringing her head to rest on the single pillow, and closed her eyes as she began to concentrate. The only sounds were the cracking of the fireplace and the howling wind outside, as both ponies attempted to slow their breathing and relax as much as possible.
Son,
she whispered, her horn beginning to glow. As Flurry began to feel more and more drowsy, falling into a deep slumber, a single mote of light left the very tip of Luna's horn, slowly floating across the cabin over to where the Crystal Princess slept on the couch. It softly landed on her forehead, connecting the two alicorns into the world of dreams. Chapter 8, Dreamwalker, Part 2. Princess Flurryheart slowly regained consciousness, or rather, she thought she had. She found herself standing in the middle of a snowstorm. Looking around, she found herself standing in front of the cabin that she had just entered moments ago, seeing Luna by the door.
We are still dreaming, yes?
Flurry asked, as the Princess of the Night came up to her.
Indeed, this is my premonition,
Luna explained as they gazed down at the Crystal Empire, barely visible through the blowing snow. What they couldn't make out were three ghostly swirling trails of light that were circling the cityscape up above, and they were the source of howling that echoed off of the cliffs overhead.
What are those? I've heard them in my dreams as well,
Flurry asked.
Wendigos, heralds of the end of an era. They are strengthened by hate, fear, and distrust. The first equines to set hoof on this continent were running from these spirits, and they were still followed until the three races learned to cooperate or face certain death.
Luna answered.
You tried to stop them? Many times. Each time I was overtaken by the cold or buried in the storm. I pondered for months how to overcome a seemingly hopeless situation. Eventually, I became so resigned that I turned around to the cabin and went inside and merely waited. And that was the key.
The pair of alicorns turned to the cabin and walked into the front door. When the door latched closed, Flurry went to the front window and looked out at the landscape, and saw the stars overhead begin to move across the sky.
The passage of time,
Luna explained.
I could not discern how long, but I now knew that I should come up here and wait. And now I know for what. For you.
There was a knock at the door, and their surroundings faded to black.
So, you can likely understand why I've been anticipating this meeting,
Luna told her.
Yes, I can certainly see why, but what about mine?
Flurry asked. Luna's horn glowed, and the blackness brightened and shifted again, and they found themselves standing in the foyer of the Crystal Castle, where the heart floated in the center, slowly rotating on its central axis. The howling continued outside, and it was Luna's turn to watch carefully. Frigid gusts of winds burst through the windows, sending the long, thick curtains billowing in towards the Crystal Heart's pedestal. Both alicorns shivered as the chamber began to ice over. The howling turned to shrieking, and the trio of ghostly spirits galloped through the windows directly at Flurryheart. Luna tensed up, but Flurry remained calm, simply standing her ground as the Crystal Heart began to spin rapidly. The Princess of the Night was certain that they would have overtaken Flurry, had the heart not reacted and shot out a trio of white beams at the Wendigos, stopping them in their tracks before they reached Flurry. They gave out screams of defiance as the beams persisted, then three glowing spheres slowly came out of the heart. Luna was able to quickly discern their forms: a brilliant white rounded diamond, a more angular pointed sapphire, and a curiously shaped turquoise that looked like
spread wings.
She didn't have time to look closer, but they and the Crystal Heart exploded in a flash of blinding white light, and both alicorns were returned to the infinite sea of black. Flurry calmly turned to the Princess of the Night.
So, what do you make of that, Princess?
The Crystal Princess asked. Luna's horn glowed, and the next thing Flurry knew, she was coming back to consciousness on the cabin's couch. She sat up, seeing Luna wake up on the bed in the corner. Flurry's eyes widened when she saw the sun rising in the east. They had been sleeping all evening and overnight. Without a word, she stepped outside to the front of the cabin, with Luna following her. The Crystal Princess's expression was considerably more worried as she gazed back down at the blizzard blowing through and around the Crystal Empire below. Luna came up to her side.
All the tales I have heard suggest that unless all of Equestria comes together, that the Wendigos in the fatal frost they bring are unstoppable. But this suggests otherwise. You and I certainly have much to discuss on the way down the mountain.
There is hope after all, as already seen, but who knows what was sacrificed. Best case scenario is that they somehow live through that whole ordeal, but worst case, well, you know. Anywho, let's get on to our warm donators. Top donators are 630, J Tinman, Darkside Only One Thing, and Ceru Orion. Rayden, Narwhals, Blackmoonheart, Pastel Skies, Austin Rolan, Stu Hex, Swordbrother and Mordred, Omicron Lyrae, Will, Chris, Twinkie, zaza, Riot Soul, Iron Sky, Baddest Waffle, Shadow Moon, and many more awesome people. Thank you all so much for watching this video and live life to the fullest.